Welcome to the Real Talk Podcast, where we create conversation and community among real people about everyday issues. This is a place for you to hear truth, connect with others, and find answers to your questions.
Hey everybody, welcome to Real Talk. We are wrapping up an entire month on the topic of missions and evangelism. And just as Jesus turned water into wine, today we have saved the best for last. And we have with us Hayes Wade and Bob Wilson. How'd you guys like that intro right there?
That's pretty good. That was a lot better than what I get at home.
There you go. Well, we're glad to have you guys, sincerely, to have you here on the show. And when I thought about this topic and what we would do, you were the first two that came to my mind. And I just want to tell you that I have such respect for you guys, not only in the way that you lead your families, but also how you have leveraged your careers to impact both here locally and globally, using your careers in God's work. So thank you guys for what you do. And I want to start off with Hayes. Let me give just a little background. I know that you have an MBA in international business, and then I think I also read that you have a doctorate in strategy and innovation. Is that right?
Yep, that's right.
And so why don't you just take a few minutes and just give us a little background of your family, your career path, and then any other life experiences that has shaped you for who you are today.
Yeah, sure. So family, been married for 17 years to my wife, Sarah Lauren. I think she literally could run for mayor. Everybody knows her. And got two boys, Dixon, 14, and Harris, 9. Education-wise, I just studied the things I have a lot of interest in. So business, economics, international business, and strategy and innovation. So those are good topics, neat topics for me. So just things I dove into. And as far as, what kind of motivated me to get into missions, it's just one of those things, just there's a huge need out there, and I do what God called me to do. I'm just a business guy. But, anytime, whether it's in the community, I get a chance to share, what God's done in my life. I like to do that. And if there's a way I can open avenues for people anywhere to do that same thing more easily, then I'm all for trying to apply whatever I can to help them with their goals.
Oh, that's awesome. That's great. And Bob, you're a family medicine doctor in Springdale, Arkansas, right? I think you graduated from the University of Arkansas. Was that UAMS or was that in Fayetteville?
Yeah, medical school in Little Rock.
Okay, that's right. And you were at Mississippi State. I forgot to say that.
Yeah,
right?
A lot of different schools, but
forgive you.
Hell State.
There you go. Yeah. Well, Bob, tell us a little bit about yourself, family background, a little bit about your career path, and then anything in your life that has shaped you for today.
Yeah. So my wife is Misty, and we just celebrated our 25th wedding anniversary this summer. And we have 2 kids, Wade and Allie Jane, and they are both students at Ouachita Baptist University. And that's where Misty and I went to school and where we met. And I went to medical school, like you said, in Little Rock after that. And then we did residency, and we moved to this area in 2003 and have been active members of First Baptist Rogers ever since then. And I'm a family doctor in the area, and just the question about what's kind of shaped us. And I know our talk today is on how your vocation factors into mission, and my mission in some way kind of influenced my choice of my vocation. I started out a business major in college, mainly because it was the practical thing to do, and it was a secure thing. It was going to lead to just a safe place to be in life, and no offense, Hayes, but I got into my business classes and I hated it. And it was boring, and I couldn't see myself doing this the rest of my life. And honestly, it was really because I really had the wrong motivation in doing that. And I wasn't really coming from a super materialistic place, I don't think, but I was just coming from a selfish place and just what's just the safe thing to do and that kind of thing. And God kind of really got a hold of me probably my sophomore year of college and showed me how to reevaluate my motivations in life and my career path. And I actually had a lot of friends who were going into the ministry, and I at times I kind of asked myself and God as a Christian, am I not supposed to do that, to go into full-time ministry? And through lots of conversations, I with God and with professors and friends and family, it kind of showed me, no, you can serve Him through whatever you do, but let's let Him influence what you do. And eventually I came back around to, what do I like to do? What do I enjoy? What am I good at? And what can I be used in? And it kind of came to medicine in different ways. And so really did feel like God kind of influenced that decision and me being able to use my career, wanting to have a career that I know a whole lot of businessmen, including my idol Hayes here, who use business to do that. But God had me use medicine to do that.
That's awesome. And I'm going to continue with you, Bob. You're already touching on it a little bit, but when exactly did you first get involved in missions, maybe your first mission trip or when you were exposed to it? And then when was it that God gave you a bigger vision for what He's doing around the world?
Well, and you want me to keep this short, huh? My first mission trip, I think, was in high school. I was probably around 17 years old, and our youth group in high school went to very, very poor parish in South Louisiana. Yeah. And that was back in the days where I think churches were just kind of getting into the short-term mission trip thing. Yeah. And our church had never been on one before, but it changed my life. Mm-hmm. One of the aspects of it was my youth minister was very intentional about preparation, not just practically, but in prayer. I remember vividly that many years ago, just a lot of times getting together in groups for prayer for this trip and for what was going to happen. And that we got on that trip and I saw prayers answered in ways that I hadn't before. And none of it was, worthy to make a movie about miracles or something like that, but it was just seeing just so many ways this trip came together that the Lord just worked and opened my eyes in so many ways. I don't think I'd ever been exposed to that degree of poverty before. Yeah. And honestly, even though it's in the States, it was a different culture that I got exposed to. And just seeing, I think, God's heart for people who aren't like me and who are coming from different situations in every way. And after that, kind of went off to college and again went to a Christian school that was very intentional in so many ways about living your life on mission, but also about international missions. And I took a few religion classes, but even in my non-religion classes, just was influenced by that in so many ways. I had a lot of missionary kids were going to school with me, and met a lot of international students, and saw some of those make decisions for Christ while I was in school, and had friends who were going to school to be a missionary and who ended up doing that, and I got to go on my first international mission trip to Australia as a college student, and kind of finally got opened up to other nations, and just it really got solidified during those college years how the Lord has a mission to reach the nations, and how He wants to use us to do that. And just that Acts 1:8 kind of vision really just got instilled in me. And in college more than anywhere else, just all those experiences. And that just has gotten expanded on coming to church here. And actually one of the main reasons we came to church here was just recognizing that this church's emphasis on missions and going and supporting and all those things. And we had a lot of other choices on where to come to church, but that was a major thing on why we came here. And we've been on many trips here, short term, and befriended missionaries and through all another major thing is the Global Impact celebrations that our church has done. It's been some of the most memorable experiences at this church over the years for me, and have kind of revived my own personal spiritual life during those times. And anyway, I'll stop
That's
there.
Good. Yeah, and it's events like that and experiences that really help you to see that God's at work everywhere. That's one thing that I tell young people on all the different trips that I've gone on. I've found two things: Coca-Cola. Everywhere I've gone, I found Coca-Cola there, even in the furthest reaches in Africa. And then I find God at work. Yeah. He's at work everywhere, and it's just awe-inspiring to see that. Hayes, I want to ask you the same question. When did you get involved in missions? Was it when you were younger, when you were older? And then also, how was it or when was it that God kind of showed you kind of a bigger vision of what he's doing around the world?
Yeah. I mean, when I first got, when I just really, I wasn't aware of what I call the issue. Mm-hmm. My wife and I were helping Eddie and Sarah Tutt teach a class, and I was preparing for a lesson one Sunday, and it just kind of hit me. I was like, I wonder where we're at with kind of, in the business world, we call it brand penetration, but like how saturated is Christianity around the world? I mean, it's been over 2,000 years, and just kind of where are we at? And so I started looking, and to be honest with you, that's actually a hard piece of information to find. Yeah. But through a lot of searching, I finally found it. The more I couldn't find it, the more I was intrigued. I was like, okay, this has to be out here. And I found resources like peoplegroups.org and a couple of other things. And when I saw how many people groups were out there, I was blown away. I was just like, you got to be kidding. I mean, we've been at this a long time. Like, how can this be right? Yeah. So then I was thinking maybe the data was wrong, and won't chase a rabbit, but I interrogated the data, and the data is good. Yeah. And so, from there, it was just, I mean, when you see that, you have to do something about it. Yeah. And, my wife and I, we were praying about, should we be missionaries? And that's not the route God wanted us to go. But about that time, Wade, who's now with FAM, based here, he had a heart and kind of a call for a people group in East Asia. Yeah. So my wife and I went on that initial vision trip to go over there, and just loved it. So that's where that started.
What year was that when you went on that trip?
I'm the worst at keeping up with time, but that was probably 7 years ago or so.
Okay. Yeah. Wow. Yeah. You and I have had several conversations on, you know what, let me back up a second here a little bit. Tell me a little bit for each of you guys, a little bit of your specific work. I know when you and I have sat down together, we've talked about a couple of different passions that you have about new work that you were wanting to help get started and get self-sufficient in East Asia. Tell me a little bit about that work, but then also you've done something very similar in the last maybe 18 months, 2 years here locally, something very unique.
3 years.
Yeah, tell me a little bit about those two areas of ministry that you helped start up, and then what have you learned through those things as well?
Yeah, so primarily the biggest gift God has given me is just the ability to kind of see things differently and come up with solutions to problems. So around 2016, I started seeing where in East Asia legislation was passing that would make it very difficult for M's in those areas to continue to function as they had. Yeah. And and what I see as a trend out there is a lot of these governments will find ways to cut off funding to people trying to do the work in those areas. So it was a God thing on this particular one. I knew about that as an issue, but I was in Germany at a trade show, and I came across a trade booth of some guys from North Carolina that were selling a particular agriculture product. And there was a demographic in East Asia that just had an unsatisfiable demand for that product. And I asked them, I was like, what are a bunch of guys from North Carolina doing in Germany at this trade show? Yeah. And they explained it to me. And so right then it hit me. I was like, you know what, this particular product, this would be an easy way to help provide access for the guys that are working in those areas. So when I got home, I called up a contact that we're familiar with here at our church. And I mean, the kind of rest was history.
Yeah. Wow. So with that process, there's a lot of things that you learn, and there are some things that have been really hard, and there's been some things that have been really exciting. Tell me about some of the wins and then some of the struggles over the last couple of years with that, and what have you learned along the way?
Yeah. Do you want me to answer the question about F3 first?
Yeah, do that. Yeah.
All right. So F3 is the second one, and been working on that about 3 years. But that one has less to do with me individually than really anything. But F3 is a nationwide network of guys, and the whole goal is just reinvigorating male leadership. But it's really a way to bring people to Christ. And there's a lot of guys, and if you go around and ask guys to come to church, I mean, you'll hear no a lot for a lot of reasons.
Yeah.
But for some reason, when you ask guys to go meet you somewhere and work out with some friends, and it's non-competitive and it's free and it's a fun environment, and they are interested in that. So my business partner and another guy that works with us, they were always telling me that we needed to bring F3 to Northwest Arkansas, and they live over in the north of Atlanta, Georgia. And finally, I was in Atlanta one day, and I went to one of the workouts, and you get a nickname in F3, but one of the guys, at the end of the workout, there's a circle, and whoever's the sixth guy in order has to come forward and kind of tell about himself. And this guy, his nickname's Garfield, and he shares a story that he used to be the biggest pharmaceutical drug dealer in the North Atlanta area.
Wow.
He had never seen another man pray anywhere, didn't know anything about the gospel, and he was lost. He was an alcoholic and just in everything he didn't need to be into. Fran invited him to F3. First time he got to see a grown man pray. He never wanted to go to a church, but when his friends that he works out with were going to have a Bible study, he was okay with going and having breakfast, even though he didn't believe. Wow. And he listened, and that led to questions, and he ended up giving his life to Christ. And when I heard his testimony, I was like, okay, now that's worth doing. So
that's cool.
We all collectively started working on getting it set up, and really and truly, the guys in this church were such a big help in that.
That's good.
I called every one of them I had phone numbers for and asked them for the first workout, like, hey, can you please be here? Because if a bunch of you come, that'll jumpstart it. And that was 3 years ago, and now we have over 200 people involved in it, and we have workouts every day of the week except for Wednesday and Sunday, kind of all over the area.
That's amazing. It's going better than I thought it was. I knew it was going well, but that is amazing.
Yeah.
What's your nickname?
Yazoo.
Yazoo. All right. Oh, that's cool.
That's where my wife's from, Yazoo City. So
that's cool.
They couldn't think of anything interesting to give me a nickname for, so they said, "Where's your wife from?" And I told them. They were like, "That's it, Yazoo."
That's cool. That's cool. So with your work in East Asia, and then with the F3 that you started here, just tell me some things that you're learning along the way. Anything that was harder than you thought, or any challenges along the way? What have you been learning?
Different lessons on the different projects, but business. Someone with a business background, working with people internationally that have a ministry background, that required just a different kind of patience.
Yeah.
Because it's a completely different mindset. Yeah. And it all starts too with being selfless and just realizing that anything I have, it's God's. I mean, it's just on loan to me. So whether it was funds, time, or whatever, it was, it's His to direct how He wanted it to be handled. But just patience, trusting in God, and through that whole process, I mean, it was really hard. We had one of our first guys that was really the champion of it. His father-in-law committed suicide the day before we were going to sign our first contract on a big deal. And so there was a huge aspect of spiritual warfare involved in it. And so that project really, really pulls on your heart a lot, because there is so much real pain that comes along with the progress.
Right.
But, amazing people committed to the project, and a lot of good work happened there. We're kind of on the back end of shutting that down. We knew that wasn't going to last forever. Yeah. But I truly believe that God's will was done, and a lot of people made a lot of sacrifices to get it there.
Yeah.
In F3, it's one of those things, like a lot of days when we were out here and there might just be 3 guys and my dog, and it's 20 something degrees outside, and we're working out outside.
Wow.
I mean, that those are times when you really question, like, man, am I supposed to do this? But God never gave me a direction to stop, and so we just kept going, and I mean, it was like at some point it just ignited.
Yeah. I love what you said there about there were days where you just were questioning whether you ought to be doing this, but you had heard God tell you to do it, but he had not told you to stop doing it.
Right.
And that's the importance of a calling.
Yeah.
Of knowing that God's prompted you to do something, because there's always going to be obstacles and fears along the way. Ashley and I have almost the exact same testimony and story. I would say we were in Colorado for 8.5, almost 9 years, and about 5 years into it, we had a similar conversation going through a hard season, and the question was asked, do we need to leave? And our conclusion was, we remember God called us here, but we don't have any clarity that he's calling us away. It can be so easy to walk away or run away from maybe what's happening around you. And so, man, that's a great word right there and a good lesson. Bob, let me ask you the same question. I know of your medical work here locally and in the Amazon, but I don't know kind of the bigger picture. You've done other things as well. Share with us a little bit about both your work here locally and overseas.
Yeah. Our church has got the River of Life Medical Clinic that we, during these COVID days, we've not been able to do that. But prior to COVID, we would meet twice a month to provide free medical care to people who needed that. And that's been a really neat group of people from our church, nurses and other doctors and pharmacists and some support people have come together to do that. I've been on multiple short-term international mission trips, medical. Most recently, our church is involved with Amazon Outreach ministry that partners American groups, teams with churches in Brazil that are doing some outreach to the outskirts of the tributaries of the Amazon River, and we get to go into communities where the gospel has really not penetrated, and kind of almost just the theme for a lot of just these medical missions that we do. This ministry calls us crowbar ministry, and so we are crowbars to get into these communities that are closed otherwise to Christian work that's going on. And we give clout to these local missionaries. We're talking about people who live in Brazil and who are from Brazil, who are Brazilian people trying to reach their own people, but they're not allowed into some of these places until they get to show these communities that we're bringing you some doctors and some dentists and some free eyeglasses and some people who want to hang out with your kids so those teams, those trips turn into Bible studies in these communities that didn't have them before, and which eventually turn into some churches that are being planted, and so that's been really neat, kind of seeing what's happening there these last few years that our church has been involved there. Been on a few trips to Nicaragua and to some very we call them remote trips there, to some remote villages that have got very little access to medical care and to the church, and it's been and then prior to that, many years ago, or it was after the big earthquake in Haiti, our church actually put together a real quick impromptu medical team that went to Haiti 2 weeks after the earthquake.
Wow.
And provided some medical care and partnered with a local ministry that was going to take over on some things after that, and then a little bit before that, we went to Thailand. Our church took several people to Thailand to kind of help with the big missions conference there, and we staffed a medical clinic for about 2,000 missionaries while we were there to provide medical care to them and during their time, and it's been really neat seeing those things. I kind of don't know if this is the right place to say this, but at times we question the impact that we make on short-term trips, and I remember actually this is another trip way back in high school and college that we went on to a Navajo Indian reservation. And I was in medical school. I was somehow interacting with a professor who used to work on the Navajo reservation, and she found out that I'd been there, and she said, "What'd you do?" And I said, "Yeah, we went with a youth group." She said, "Oh, you were one of those people." And I said, well, okay, what do you mean? And she said, "I saw all these groups come in just 1 week at a time, just come in and come out, and they got numbers to take home." And that kind of made me feel weird for a little bit. But I've seen just the impact that these 1 week trips can make.
Yeah.
I've seen long-term relationships be built with people that we reached out to in these places, and I've seen people come to know Christ for the first time and get partnered with that local church who took over. Mm-hmm. But I've also seen how I've been changed through all these trips too. Yeah. And so I think there's a lot of value in these short-term trips, especially when we're partnering with some local partners who are using us as crowbars or as other facilitators for what they're doing. So we don't just go to these places as one time.
I totally agree with you.
In and done type things. There's ongoing work that, and I think there are trips that happen that aren't like that. But I think it's important that we evaluate that when we go on these trips, and I'm proud that our church is very intentional about making sure that long-term things happen with where we go.
I like the word crowbar, and we're going to talk about here in a minute just some advantages of people leveraging their careers. It's not that it's better than career missionaries. People who are called to be missionaries over a long period of time, man, they have, they're the heroes of the faith in a lot of ways, but there's some advantages, and you're naming one of them. It's sometimes someone that's going on a business trip will have greater advantages and open doors than a career missionary would, in that same location, having those conversations. And going back to the 1 week thing, we used to tell teams that were coming into Colorado to help us, we'd have anywhere from 15 to sometimes 35, 45 people coming on a team. And the amount of work we would get done in a week would be more than I could get done in several months when we first got there. And so those teams, we had 13 teams come in our very first summer, which partly was a mistake. That was a lot of work, but we got so much done, so many contacts, so many people for me to follow up with. It was incredible, and it would have taken me years to do that alone. But yet with these teams, they definitely helped us to get the ball further down the road in a very quick way. And so this is a perfect transition. And Hayes, I want to begin it with you. We just named one, kind of the crowbar effect, but what are some of the advantages of individuals using their career, joining in on God's work around the world? What would you see as an advantage?
I mean, there's a couple that come to mind right away, but one is there's just a lot more open doors, whether it's a doctor or an educational person or a business person or whatever, especially in the international community. There's a lot of walls put up for people trying to share the gospel today in countries. And I think the enemy is doing a great job of making that difficult. Yeah. So when you come in first under your profession, just being who you are, but also being evangelical, whether it's here or somewhere else, it's easier to meet people and build relationships and that kind of thing.
And instant credibility, a lot of times when you're coming, know.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, I really think that's the biggest thing. It really opens a lot of doors for you.
Mm-hmm. That's good. Bob, can you think of, you've already named a good one, but anything else you can add to that? What are some advantages when it comes to individuals using their profession to join in on God's work around the world?
Yeah, I'm not sure I have a whole lot more to add other than that, but other than to say, it kind of galvanizes me when I come back to help me realize that I can live my life here on mission, and I don't like I wish I did. And sometimes we just get into the routine. But when I go, I realize, wow, I'm using what I do here to help further God's kingdom over there. And it reminds me that I can be doing that here too, and all. And I think that goes along with any career that we can, helps us see a vision for how we can do that while we're here too.
Yeah, and that's part of the thing that we get the takeaway from when we go on a trip and we see God at work. It's just natural to think I could be doing the same thing in my own neighborhood or in my own office. One thing that I've talked to Steve Ellis about over the last few weeks as he's coming on. We both have the same heart. He's got the career missions background, mine in church planting. But it's fun to be able to hear his heart and us to dream together of partnering in certain pockets of the world in sending doctors over to this area or to this city and meeting other doctors and collaborating together and them taking businessmen to the same area. And think of the work that the Christians can do in Northwest Arkansas. If Northwest Arkansas adopted a city somewhere else and yet there's intentionality with that, I just think would be amazing to see how God might be able to transform an area with the relational contacts that are there. And so I'm excited that God's brought him to our church, and I just told him, hey, I'm going to be your best friend, whatever you need from me. I would love to help you out. And I see guys like you, both of you guys, and the work that you're already doing and the way that you're already modeling it, that could be a big asset to what we would love to see happen in the future. What advice, this is going to be our last question as we close out our time, and I'd love for you both to answer this question. And I'll start with you, Bob, this time, but what advice would you give to someone watching today that has not yet gone on a mission trip? At this time, when this airs, our Global Impact Celebration will have wrapped up. This is going to happen. This is going to be airing the week afterwards. But maybe someone went through that week and got to open their eyes, but they're hesitant to take that first step to go on a trip. What would you say to someone like that?
Go. Mm-hmm. I'll say more, but I mean, go.
Yeah.
There's so many opportunities that our church has, and that's one of the reasons that, like I said, just drew us to this church. And you got opportunities to go on short-term trips, locally, nationally, and internationally, and I've gotten to meet so many people in our church through these trips, and gotten so close to so many people in our church, and people who've gone for the first time, who've never gone before, who were scared to death. But I have never seen anyone on any of these trips that went with us who didn't have a place, who didn't have something to do. You don't have to be a doctor. You don't have to be a businessman. Whatever walk of life you come from, if you've made yourself available to God, how every one of these trips, everyone's had a place, and there's been times that we needed that person in that place, and we've been in remote Nicaragua needing to have an engine fixed, and we had a mechanic with us.
Wow.
And we've been just so many stories like that of how God's going to use whatever you have to do that, and it's going to open your eyes to what He's doing around this world, help you realize that the gospel is for everyone and not just for us. And the warning is that I've seen multiple people be called to career ministry through these experiences. So watch out. If you come, you may get the bug and kind of get stuck with it. But there's just take advantage. And I know not everyone can go, but you can pray, you can give, you can support. And so many of these trips I've been on and my kids have been on, and we've just had the support from our church. And so may we continue to be that church that sends and that has that vision and that supports and does everything.
Amen. Yeah. Hey, is anything else to add to that?
Yeah, really three things. One is just acknowledging and accepting responsibility for sharing our testimony. I mean, that's whether it's here or somewhere else. There's just take our church. There's a handful of staff people. There's over 500,000 people in Northwest Arkansas, and on any given Sunday, we got about 3,000 people in the service. So it's really the congregation's responsibility to bring people to Christ. And so we've got to accept and acknowledge responsibility. And the next one is just pray for the opportunities. pray for the opportunities and be prepared. Just to give your testimony. I mean, that's all you, just one little piece. That's all it takes, or ask somebody if you can pray for them. And then the last part of that is just understand and accept how powerful the Holy Spirit is in that process. And it's really not anything that we are going to do that's going to bring anybody to the Lord. But we're in a remote village in East Asia, and we prayed to meet the person of peace, and we park in some just like weird spot off a road. And literally this elderly guy comes by and says, "Have y'all eaten yet?" And it's like 6 foreigners and all, Caucasian foreigners in a East Asia place. Yeah. And we go to the guy's house and we share with him who we are. And then he invites us to the village. And I sent you a picture of this girl from this, but we go to the village, and then this lady asked us to come to her house, and in these places, the grandparents kind of raise the kids, and this young girl's there, and so she's hearing the story of how much God loves us and what he was willing to do for us, and the story of Christ. And she says, "I want to believe that." And her grandmother gets scared and says, "Hey, y'all need to stop here. I'm worried about this." We find out later on the next year, a group of East Asian students came through the area, and the girl shared with them that she was a believer, and they gave her first Bible.
Wow!
But she was the first believer in that area.
That's so cool.
And so but if it's just sharing your testimony or your faith with with an Uber driver or the guy sitting beside you on an airplane, whatever it is, you never know what that leads to. And it's not our responsibility to close the deal, as business people say. It's just trust God, ask for the opportunities, and trust God to give you the words, and everything will go like it's supposed to.
Absolutely. When I look through Scripture, you see over and over again kind of a reluctant individual that God calls out, to step out in faith. You think of Moses and his original calling at the burning bush, and his reluctance. It's almost humorous how reluctant he was to take on that role. And then I look at the disciples, and how Jesus, in an amazing way, he could see the potential in very ordinary people and the extraordinary things that God does through ordinary people, whether it's a fisherman, tax collectors, you and me. It's awesome to see what God does. And that's really the makeup of the church. There's not a superstar at First Baptist Rogers, but there's a lot of people who have said yes to God, and even in fear and trepidation. And so I would say the same things that you guys have said, just lean into it. Don't run away from that fear or hesitancy, but really just trust that God's going to do the work. And because he's the only one that can, and you will come out better for it, and you'll come out inspired from it. You guys will see it in a couple of weeks, but this morning we got to interview the Johnson family, Betsy and Kendall. And one thing that I thought was so cool is how Kendall went in 2018 on his very first mission trip to the Amazon. And when he came back, Betsy was sharing this, that she just had tears in her eyes. She saw a changed man. Her husband was changed by that trip. And he had never gone on a trip like that before. He hesitated in going in the first place, but he came back with a different perspective of what God's doing. And she longed to go and experience what he experienced. And that's the Christian story. We have treasures in jars of clay. We've experienced something that sometimes we can't even explain very well. But hopefully other people will catch it. And when they do, their lives will be changed as well. And so that's what we long for, is for others to experience the gospel, experience that same thing. So if you're watching tonight, we want to thank you for watching. And we don't do this just because we love it. We do this because we're hoping that somebody's watching where God's been tugging on their heart to either make a next step in their faith journey, or whether it's taking their first mission trip. And so if that's you, we just want to encourage you to respond to whatever that is. If God's tugging on your heart and inviting you into relationship with him, then I just would encourage you, don't hesitate, respond. And it's really the simplest thing you can do. It's almost unbelievable what God has done for us. He's done all the work. And if you want a relationship with him, simply just say, God, I know you love me, and I've made a mess of my life trying to do it my own way. Forgive me my sins. Come into my life, and I want to commit my life to you. And when we begin a conversation with him with that, it's amazing what he'll reveal to us as well. And so I want to encourage you to do that. Others of you, just take a step of faith. It may be simply just serving somewhere in your local church, or taking that step and going on a trip. But I promise you, if you'll step out of your comfort zone, that's where you will find God working, and where he'll work in your life as well. So thank you for joining us. If you've enjoyed today's content, I want to encourage you to share it with somebody that might be encouraged or challenged by it. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and engage us in the future with our future content. Bob, Hayes, thank you guys for joining us tonight. And I'm excited to run that race with you guys in the months and the days ahead. God bless you guys, and have a great day.